for taking out the time of your busy schedule to join us tonight. We are joined by some wonderful, passionate people about the Yes on Four campaign. And to kick it off, we're going to start by getting a welcome from our CEO from Faith in Public Life, Miss Janae Lewis.
Hello, good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. As Adwan said, my name is Janae Lewis. I'm the CEO of Faith and Public Life Action. We are an organization, a national organization with offices in DC, Florida, Ohio, and Georgia. And we are excited to work with all of you to win Yes on Four. And I am a big advocate of being transparent. So I want to ask a tech question. I don't know if I'm supposed to be on the spotlight right now, so that we can go ahead and make sure folks can see me and hear me. Either way, I'm gonna keep talking. There you go. Just wanted to flag it. So I live in Washington, D.C. Many years ago, I was a faith-based organizer in Polk County, Florida. I grew up in the D.C. area, and working in Florida was my first job out of college. I was passionate about faith, I was passionate about building grassroots power, and I was passionate about helping people of faith fight for justice. And I had never lived in a place where there were so many Confederate flags. I had never lived in a place that was so segregated. And working in Florida, it humbled me and it taught me a lot. And it grew my respect for all of you and for Floridians, folks living in city centers in Florida, folks living in rural areas in Florida, navigating a lot of stuff that I didn't have to navigate growing up in Washington, D.C., in order to fight for the values and the beliefs that we all believe in. And we are still in that same position today, but we have this beautiful coalition of folks fighting to win Amendment 4, fighting to ensure that voters understand that we need to vote yes on 4, because comprehensive reproductive health care is a part of our values. It is a part of who we are as people of faith. It reflects access and dignity for everyone. Now, I don't currently live in Florida, but I am a Black woman in America who has encountered the healthcare system on many an occasion. And whether it was around my reproductive health, or whether it was around my heart health, whether it was around my mental health, I have had many experiences where I had to fight and advocate for myself just so that doctors and nurses would listen to what I was saying, would believe what I was saying about my body and about my mind, and would give me the type of care that I needed. And I'm relatively privileged, right? I have a college education, I'm middle class. I have access to good hospitals here in Washington, D.C. I have a car. And I know that there are so many people in our country who lack one or all of those things and are fighting just like I had to, so that healthcare professionals would listen to who I am. And so I know that what we are doing is helping to lift up the dignity and the respect for all people in this country, to know and to listen to what our minds tell us, to what our bodies are telling us, and to what our families and our communities are helping us understand about what is good for us in any given moment around our healthcare. And we know that reproductive healthcare is about so much more than abortion, but abortion is a big part of that. And that's the flashpoint right now for us in the country. That's the flashpoint, the wedge that people are trying to use to confuse us, to make us think that our faith and our God does not allow for access to that level of care. But we know that that is incorrect. We have faith leaders on the call who are going to remind us of that. And we know that voting yes on 4 is going to be a reflection of our values and not a violation of that. So I'm excited for this conversation tonight. I'm excited to partner with all of you and the work you're doing to vote, get your family and friends to vote. And I am praying for all of us, but especially for all of you, because you are doing this in a state that had 2 back-to-back hurricanes. There's another hurricane hanging out in the Caribbean right now, trying to decide where it's going to go. You all are not new to this. You all are resilient. You know what to do and how to handle it. And despite all of that, I know that you are going to turn folks out in Florida, and we are going to win yes on 4. So with that, I will turn it back over to Adwan to move us through the rest of our evening.
Thank you so much, Janae. I really appreciate that. We will now move on to following that. We will now move on to Pastor Gundy. Pastor Gundy is going to give us a grounding. So, Pastor Gundy, when you are ready, sir, you can take it away.
Okay, now tell me one, two, or three things you would like for me to express in this grounding process as a group. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Yes, sir. Whatever's on your heart to express on this grounding.
Well, I kind of gave you the grounding when I jumped in Numbers 5 and 20. That's the biblical context.
Well,
I think what happened, Pastor Gundy, is that everybody else was not on when you first
They were
started
not
talking.
on.
Yes,
Got
sir.
it.
And so that's why we would like for you to repeat what you said earlier, because it was
All
really
right.
good information, and I think they really need to hear that part about Numbers 5.
They're,
And so
they're
we just
about,
want you to jump
okay,
in there.
got you. If you have an opportunity, you can turn your you know, I'm a spiritual guy, and I want to put you in the Bible, whether you believe in God, whether you don't believe in God, but I want to put you there because if I can put you there, then you can better understand the Black church. You can better understand how to engage the Black church. You can better understand what to say as in reference to the Black church, whether it be about LGBTQIA plus or whether it be about the the abortion issue. The evangelicals will argue with you and say that Numbers 5, verse 20, somewhere right there, that there's about 360 laws in the Bible. And this is the only time that God himself came down and intervened and laid out a law for people to follow in the culture at that time. And what he said was there was a man's wife who had committed adultery. And when she committed adultery, the man was directed to take her to the priest. And the priest would create a bitter water. Let's just leave it like that for now. And God said, if she's committed adultery and she drank this bitter water and the baby is aborted, she committed adultery. But if she drinks the bitter water and the baby is not aborted, then you know that she didn't commit adultery. Now, somebody would say that God sanctioned abortion. I guess the question should be that God sanctioned murder. He certainly sanctioned murder, but I'm just saying. So when you go in there and you look at the text, you got to be able to read that and understand it from that perspective. The evangelicals will argue, well, that's not what that really means. And I will go back and say, you go into Hebrew and tell me that it meant something different. And now that we are now live with this, I want you to also understand when it comes to the principles of LGBTQIA plus and the Black church, you got to stay around the principles of love. But you also got to understand when it comes to the Black church that the Black church do have a right to feel where they feel, but neither the Black church nor the community or anybody else have a right to mistreat anybody because of the way they feel. LGBTQIA plus doesn't have a right to mistreat the church folks because of what they feel, and the church folks don't have a right to mistreat the LGBTQIA plus folks for the way they feel. To the Black church, you need to know getting married is a civil matter. It's not a biblical matter for us. I could go in there and I can argue that out too, but I'm just trying to share something with you as you're moving forward, not just today, but as you keep moving forward. You need old folks like me and others to sit around the table and have the conversation. That's the problem. We're not communicating and talking with each other because especially with the Baptists, they seem to think, I don't care what we say, they're going to feel the same way. That's far from the truth. because, and we don't have to argue about it. At the end of the conversation, you can agree. At the end of the conversation, you can disagree, and everybody going about their business. But at the end of the day, we should all be trying to feed people. We should all be trying to clothe people. We should all be trying to visit people in jail. We should all be trying to look out for the marginalized. I'll close on this. Don't tell me that you love me and then you mistreat me. Don't tell me that you love me and you fast and you pray, but you don't take care of the marginalized, because then when you pray, God doesn't hear it. I'm talking from a spiritual perspective. So for those of you who, if you really want to engage, really have a better understanding, really acknowledge each other, both those who believe in God, those who don't believe in God, because I'm an interfaith guy, then let's sit down at the table and have these genuine conversations of truth. And then at the end of the day, let's get up and love one another and figure out what we can do to help each other across the board. That's my grounding for what y'all are doing and what you're working through. So I've asked some pastors if they would be willing to make some calls as it relates to abortion. You need to know. I think Pastor Edwards has been to association. I've been to 2 of them. And when it comes to the issue of abortion, at the end of the day, we're saying you can't tell females what to do with their bodies. Pastors may argue it, but about it in another way, but they recognize the fact of free choice, because free choice is even in the context of what people want to do and what they don't want to do in their lives or with their body. Nobody can get around that. It's between them and their God. All right. So I hope that help you understand. Before you criticize, have the conversation and ask the question. All right. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Gundy, for that grounding. I appreciate that. And that's why we're here, right? We're here to have that conversation. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Am I a little blurry? I look blurry on my screen. Right now, I'm going to introduce the rest of the panelists. Well, I'm going to call them and then they're going to introduce themselves, because I feel and I believe that nobody can tell you what you do better than you, right? And so I will introduce the panelists. I will introduce them and then I will call them out and they will introduce themselves and we'll go around. And then we will start our round of questionings with our moderator, which is Pastor Darrell Edwards. Pastor Darrell Edwards, why don't you start, please, sir?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Pastor Darrell Edwards II, the pastor of Greater Bethany Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida. Originally from Louisiana, was prior Navy, prior military, but I'm excited to be here and to be a part of this panel discussion for a topic that really affects a lot of people in the community. And so that's who I am.
Okay, wonderful. And Chriselle, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Chriselle. I am the Black constituency organizer for Yes on 4, as well as the Black organizing program manager for Planned Parenthood here in Florida. I have been an activist for the past 7 years. I graduated from FAMU, so a lot of my work stems from making sure that the Black community has the information that we need to go out and go and fight the issues that affect us.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Gabby.
Gotcha.
Hi, I'm Gabby. She, they pronouns. I am the hotline manager here at A Woman's Choice and one of the hub leaders for here in Jacksonville, Florida for Amendment 4. I have been working in abortion advocacy for the last 3 years. I just hit my 3-year mark. And on top of abortion advocacy, I am a very prominent storyteller with We Testify. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being a panelist. We really appreciate it. And Mishika. I said it right this time, right?
Yes, you did. Hello, everyone. My name is Mishika. I'm a college student who goes to the University of North Florida. I'm also the founder and president of the Planned Parenthood Generation Action chapter there. This is my 3rd year in college. And I have been doing this sort of advocacy work, working with Planned Parenthood for the past 5 years now. I started off in high school as a LIGHT, which stands for Leaders Igniting a Generation of Healthy Teens, just a subgroup of Planned Parenthood, part of their education program. And yeah, I'm still doing it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And now we will turn it over to our moderator, Pastor Durrell, to moderate our roundtable. So take it away.
All right. Thank you again. Again, it's a privilege to be here. Let me start off by saying, as we gather tonight to really discuss this crucial issue, I just want to reflect for a moment on how deeply personal and challenging it is to really deal with reproductive health for a lot of people. Because this is not just about policies, but it's about the lives that these policies impact. And so some of the questions that we have to ask, especially as Pastor Gundy was talking, we have to ask, how do we as leaders of faith and community guide with both conviction and compassion? I mentioned that, I'm a pastor of Greater Bethany Baptist Church. I didn't mention that I'm also a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I'm the vice president of our Union Progressive Association. I'm the vice president of young pastors for Florida General Baptist Convention. So I'm involved in a lot of things all across the state. I've been doing community activism for a while now. And so these are some important topics. And I think a lot of times it becomes very polarizing, especially when we talk about religion and you find people on different ends of the spectrums as though what they're saying is the final word. But as Pastor Gundy just explained to us, even in Numbers, we have biblical texts that we can really begin to reason and deal with and ask the questions, where does God really fit in this conversation? Whether we believe in God or not, as Pastor Gundy said, I'm definitely interfaith. Whether we believe in God or not, or whatever God that we serve, whatever our faith tradition is, we have to understand that these things impact many people, and it's not always easy to talk about. It can be very triggering. For instance, as I get ready to get into these questions, I'll just give you 30 seconds personal story. Over 20 years ago, my wife was pregnant and she had an ectopic pregnancy. For those that don't know, that means the pregnancy was in the tube. And so the doctors recommended that we had to terminate the pregnancy. Why? Because one, if it would have continued, tube would have burst and she would have died. Two, it was not a viable pregnancy. The baby could not live inside the tube. And so under the current laws of Florida, we would have had to try to get a second opinion and a third opinion, and possibly would not have been able to get it in time because it ended up being an emergency situation. And my wife could have died, right? And so I'll tell anybody, I am pro-life, but I vote pro-choice, right? I believe in life, but I believe that it is all about choice. And so that being said, I also want to thank Pastor Gundy for his grounding words. It's clear that faith plays a pivotal role in shaping how we approach moral and ethical questions. So as we move into this conversation, I want to encourage everybody to think about how we can take these values and apply them in ways that serve all members of our community, because we're all in this together. So this question goes out to everybody on the panel. First question I have, it goes out to everybody. How does your faith tradition address the moral and ethical considerations surrounding abortion? And also, do you believe these views should influence state law? Why or not? So this goes out to everyone.
Just call on somebody, Pastor, first.
Oh, okay, great. Then since I'm calling on somebody, I'm gonna just look at the first person that's right there on my screen in front of me with this nice smile, Miss Gabby Long. And so
This question is really hard for me. I come from a very diverse background. I am generational Catholic on one side of my family and Southern Baptist on the other side of my family. So I have like two very extreme versions of religion. And growing up, abortion was not something that was ever discussed in my home. I grew up with the values of, you know, if you're a part of the LGBTQ community, you're going to hell, unfortunately. And obviously, like, I don't believe in that at all. I think it's very wrong to have that kind of viewpoint on somebody, because in the Bible, it teaches us to love, you know, and that's something that I do carry with me. And I honestly don't think that the church should be involved with legislator. We have, you know, stuff in paper for a reason that says, you know, separation of church and state. And I do believe that people should be able to practice their, you know, their religions here. You know, part of being in America is having these religious freedoms. And I think that we are so far away from America being that melting pot and being so diverse. We're forgetting that, you know, there are so many groups of communities here, whether it be, you know, BIPOC, you know, LGBTQ, you know, any community. I think that we all just need to take a step back, and we have to put our personal feelings aside when it comes to everybody else. So I don't think that the church and the legislator should coincide, just how I feel like the church and school should not coincide, because again, it's another area where there is very diverse groups of people, and your religion is not somebody else's religion. And I think that we have to keep that in consideration.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Miss Santil, do you mind jumping in there? Hopefully I said that right.
Yes. I mean, I do want to say I agree with everything that Gabby is saying, especially for the reason that, as she's already iterated, there's just so many, America is filled with diverse groups, and everyone should be free to practice whatever they believe in. And those decisions should remain between them, their religion, and especially when it comes to the topic of abortion, uh, their God and their doctor. So I do agree with all that.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And Miss Bailey, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Um, I I'm trying to throw back to my experience because I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. Albeit we were a little loose as far as like our interpretation about what is wrong and what is right according to the Bible. But I will say that um although like my family and myself were, you know, outwardly pro-abortion, that just was not the case before I even got involved in advocacy. We didn't talk about abortion. We knew people in our family who got abortion, but that was just something we never really talked about because that was something personal to them. So that has really shaped my belief that um, folks who are trying to push certain tenets of their religion onto like policy, and not really thinking about the consequences that those beliefs that they have really proliferates in real life to affect people. Like thank you so much, Pastor Edwards, for sharing your personal story about how abortion looks different for everyone, and how that translates into um, how people like think about abortion in general. So yeah, like and also like as a person who has like been in the in like abortion healthcare centers on abortion days, talking to patients, and just listening to them, and just like, you know, have them saying, you know, I prayed and stuff like that, hearing patients pray, and like, you know, call for their God, and uh just having that experience definitely kind of just made me realize like, oh, like like a religion is very important in the abortion procedure. So yeah, that's how I feel. No, like I said, no policy should be dictated by one's religion, especially because it just looks different for everyone. So that's my stance.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That policy should not be dictated based upon religion. I know we talk about America being a place where there's separation of church and state, and I don't think people really understand what that fully means. And so I will always stand on the side of I don't want to, as Christian as I am, and I believe in evangelizing and ministering to people and trying to convert. As Christian as I am, I would never try to force my beliefs on anybody else, and I wouldn't want somebody to force their beliefs upon me. And so, that being said, I don't believe that we can legislate spirituality. We can all be moral individuals and we stand on our own convictions, but we cannot legislate spirituality. We have to be able to just teach what we believe to those that want to hear what we believe, and then we stand on our convictions in how we operate. But just because I operate one way does not mean that I have to force everybody else to operate the way that I do. I know, and so bringing into to the other question here, I do have a fill-in question. I want to know, how do you think we balance the moral and ethical views that we have living in this pluralistic society that we're in? So many different faiths and belief systems exist. So how do we balance the moral and ethical views? And this is for anybody that wants to jump in right here. How do you think is a good way to balance moral and ethical views within the pluralistic society that we live, since there are so many different faiths and belief systems? I know I kind of threw y'all on the spot with that one. I see some heads nodding, but some of y'all are muted, so I'm not sure if you're trying to speak or not.
I was gonna say that, especially being in a pluralistic society, just still having to recognize that there are 7 billion other people in the world who do not think the way you do, and just accepting the fact that your the way that you see the world is just not the way how someone else experiences it. So I think it's kind of like a mental shift that needs to happen. And like, it's like kind of second nature for a lot of us human beings to want to care for another person. And sometimes our own visions get in the way of what a person who's going through an abortion is going through. So I think um like the ethics and the spirituality lies within the individual, and how they personally, like, not necessarily, or the individual who's getting the patient who's getting the abortion, and just being cognizant that this is a healthcare procedure that a lot of folks need. So just like I said, there needs to be a mental shift that that abortion is healthcare, and that abortion does not look the same for other people, and the conditions that they do get an abortion is different. So
Man, abortion is healthcare. Ms. Gabby, it looks like you have something that you would like to share. Don't shake your head. No, I'm throwing you on the spot. That's what happens when you make me moderator.
I really agree with Chriselle. I mean, I do this work every day, and I see patients from all different backgrounds, and I really think that we do have to just get out of our own being for ourselves, and just really think about others, and and just not put your own views and how you're feeling onto somebody else, because you never know what anybody is going through. You are not standing in that person's shoes, whether they're in the church or they're not. That's nobody's business. When it's that patient and that provider in that room, it's between them and their provider, not everybody else in the world. So I definitely agree with Chriselle, and I think that a start is a mental shift.
Thank you for that. And I do agree with you that it is a mental shift. And one of the things that I say often is that you never know what somebody is going through. I literally say that all the time. And so we cannot try to stand in for everybody else and try to project what we believe and what we think upon them. Now, Chriselle, this particular question that I'm about to ask is actually directed towards you, not meaning to have you all the way on the spot. Don't worry, Miss Santil, I'm coming for you next. But Miss Chriselle, can you share your current status with Yes on 4, and how we as community leaders should address the situation or the statuses in our community. And how do we make the issue plain for those that might not understand the need for Yes on 4?
Yeah, definitely. So where we stand right now is that there is 11 days until election day. So that means a lot of deadlines have already passed as far as getting people registered to vote. And I feel like today is the last day for people to request their mail-in ballot before they need to mail it in. So right now it is getting people out to vote, making sure that they know where their polling places are, making sure that they have the correct identification, as well as any other information that will make people feel like powerful voters when they go into the booth to go and vote. So a part of that is making sure that uh we not only like we go ahead and go and place our ballots to vote yes on 4, but making sure that we call it vote tripling and organizing. So for every vote, or for every voter that you talk to, you want to make sure that they have 3 people that they can go and tell about Amendment 4. So yeah, and Mishika is like a very great example about that, and the work that she does on campus and off campus. And so yeah, right now we're getting people out to vote because we only have just about 10 days left, since it's after 7. So yeah, like again, just making sure that your circle has the information about Amendment 4. So that means like making sure that they know what the amendment says, guiding them to the various resources that we have. We have, if you need flyers to pass out to people, there are hubs throughout Florida that Gabby is a captain for, to pick up these resources. So making sure that you have physical resources to pass out to people, but also making sure that they are pulling out their friends and family members to do the same, because that's the point we're at now, because after November 5th, can't place another vote. So
You're absolutely right. So it's important that we definitely get out to let our voices be heard, and continue to push and spread the word. Ms. Santel, question for you: how does race and socioeconomic status influence individuals' experiences with reproductive health services on campuses, or in college-age centered communities?
So this is a bit tricky to talk about on campus. I can say for socioeconomic factors, that's definitely a big one. As you know, college students, we as college students, we can't really afford the most, as we just came out of high school, we're still adulting, still collecting our lives. But I would say, we have a student health center on campus. But even then, they claim it as free healthcare, and it's not. You get billed at your tuition. So a really great thing, and a really great reason why I love being president of Planned Parenthood Generation Action is because we're able to provide people with these reproductive resources at no cost. We have our student health center who charges $25, I believe, 25 or more for things like Plan B. And we give that out. We're lucky enough to be able to give that out to students for free, as well as they don't really make appearances. Not to bash them, because they do a great job. They're literally healthcare providers, but I guess they just aren't able to table as frequently, and a lot of people aren't even, or I would say a lot of people aren't even like knowledgeable that we have that resource, or even know where that building is at. So just us being able to make that presence on campus all the time, being able to let people, we've made a name for ourselves on campus, and they know who to turn to if they're in trouble. I'm basically that outlet for them to receive, free condoms, free dental dams, lube, anything that help, I'm breaking down that barrier. We're right on campus, and it's at no cost. So I just love being that outlet for my peers. And yeah, I hope I answered that question to the best of my ability.
Oh no, you did. Absolutely. You
Okay.
definitely answered it, and I appreciate it. Adwan, question for you. With all of the misinformation and disinformation that's going on around this particular amendment and the interpretation of the bill by government dissenters, what do you say to patients and faith leaders that are confused and are wrestling with supporting this initiative?
I would say to them that this bill does nothing but restore what was taken. I would say to the patient, this bill does nothing but restore what was already taken. I would tell a pastor to pastor your congregation, pastor your sheep. Listen, pastoral care, right? Listen to your sheep, and you give advice based on how they're feeling and how they want to do. It's not about personal feelings. It's not about what you think. It's about the person that is in front of you and that person's health care. And if that patient so chooses to elect and bring in their pastor into this very difficult, very challenging decision, I don't even know how to say, you need to read the room.
I think one of the ways to say that is if somebody decides to bring in their pastor into a difficult decision like this, I believe that my job as pastor is to be there for them and to love them, not to criticize, not to condemn, but to love on and to support. And so I agree with you're saying. We have to look at the entire issue, the broad picture, and look at the entire issue. Well, thank you for that. Gabby and Chriselle, I want both of you to take a stab at this one. Recently, concerns about parental rights have come up and have been used as scare tactics. How can we reclaim the definition of family in a more equitable and expansive way that ensures families of all kinds are protected?
All right. So I'm glad that y'all brought up the fact that parental consent is something that's being weaponized on Amendment 4 in this campaign, which is wild because if you look at the language that will appear on the ballot, specifically says that this amendment will not affect the constitutional right for folks to get, for parents to give permission for their children to get abortions, because that's just simply not true. A lot of, I won't even see a lot, but as far as like where the campaign stands, like we value a parent's right to protect their children in any way that they can, and that is including giving them permission to get an abortion procedure. Um, but I will say, as far as like reconsidering like the family dynamic when it comes to like parental consent, um is it just goes back to like just accepting the situation and your family member for what it is and offering them support in any way that they need and verbalize. um as also, like I said, I just want to like highlight the fact that the Amendment 4 will not reverse parental consent, because parental consent was something that Floridians already voted on in the past couple years to become a part of our Constitution. So this will, I think, still like empower, like have an avenue to empower families to be supportive for abortion patients. But again, like I really think it's really sad that parental consent is used to weaponize what to weaponize healthcare essentially. So that's my stance. Gabby, did you have anything else to add?
I mean, I'm a mom. I'm a mom of a 4-year-old, so my child is not of age yet to where I have to worry about, all those things. But it is a concern, and I also agree with you. I think that, like, we should not be weaponizing, parentals, like parents' rights over their children. And obviously, our children are not property, but we want to protect them. As a mom, like I always put my child first, and I think that's the same for most parents out there. And as a parent, when you're fostering the future of the world, you want to do everything that you can to ensure that they're okay and to support them. And I hate that our current legislation is using that as a scare tactic, like, oh, if abortion is legalized, then you won't have control over your children. And I think that's just awful, because that's not the case. And I mean, we see minors all the time. I mean, I know you're with Planned Parenthood, I know you see it too. And it's heart-wrenching when we have minors come in, because it's not usually because the minor is out there being sexually active, that is a thing. But majority of our cases are minors coming from awful situations. They're being abused at home. There's sexual violence going on. Somebody, is touching them that should not be touching them. And I hate that our legislation is trying to use that as a tactic, against families. I see the slogans all the time up here in Jacksonville, save women, protect families. Well, no, protect families, save women, vote yes on 4. That is the only way that we're going to be able to protect our families. And as a mom, it's very scary, hearing what the legislator is doing, when Amber Thurman's story came out, and Candy Miller's story came out, it was very heart-wrenching. I am somebody that has had abortions, and I cannot imagine if I went to bed one night and my 4-year-old is laying in the bed next to me, and I didn't wake up. And I can only imagine my 4-year-old trying to wake up his mom to get up for the day, and I don't wake up. So I think, again, we all have to take a step back and, realize that, this is a bigger picture than just abortion, and how many, hundreds of thousands of people are being affected by, false information that is being put out into the universe and out into this world. And, there are a lot of confused people out there. My grandparents on my mom's side is one of them. They are traditionally people that vote Republican just because they're Republican. And it wasn't until I grew up and got older and became an active, voter and an active, activist, that they were like, oh, wow, there's a whole world out there and we've been doing things wrong this whole time. And it takes conversations like that. And same within the family unit. I mean, how many people at the end of the day sit down and have dinner? I think, I think that's crazy to say, but like, I know, like when I was growing up, that's how my family came together at the end of the day, to talk about the problems that we were having, with my siblings and I in school or anything. And that's part of the way that we connected, and that my parents were able to connect with all 7 of their children. So, they had to make sure that they were involved because they had 7 kids. And I think that we, if we want to retain that family value, a lot of it starts with having a sit down conversation, trusting your kids, the kids trusting their parents, and just being able to have those open conversations with each other. Because if you don't have trust, then what do you have?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I will say, I consider myself to be a strong parental influence, right? Consider myself to be a strong father in the household, and my wife and I believe, do a great job of being a good family unit with our children. I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 26. My middle child is 20. She just turned 20 yesterday. And then my youngest is about to be 16 next month. And all I have are girls, right? And I believe that we did a good job of making an open space to be able to talk and have dialogue. And I will admit that there are some conversations that they probably feel more comfortable talking to my wife about. And then there's some things that, they just need daddy to be a part of, right? But with that, I'm strong for parental rights. I believe parental rights are a huge part. And I hate the fact that oftentimes we use the parental rights as a scare tactic to try to maneuver or manipulate emotions to get people to vote the way that we want them to vote. Because I truly believe that if something was to happen to one of my daughters and they felt as though they had to go, even if it's go get an abortion, they felt they had to go do something. I would hope that I have instilled enough value in them that they rely on those values as they're making decisions, because I understand that some of those decisions may be too traumatic for them to even have a conversation with me as the father about, right? And because I think about when I was a child and some things that I don't know if I can, have this conversation. And I'm coming from a place of believing that we have a strong family unit. I am not ignorant to the fact that in society there are a lot of people that don't come from good homes. That it looks like a good family unit, but they're being abused at home. Family members are abusing them. Sexual assault cases that happen to people that's in close proximity, not from strangers. And I believe that we have to have ways to protect these individuals as well. And I think that's why it's so important that we do say yes on forward, because again, going back to a statement that was said earlier, you never know what somebody is going through. And we cannot be so close-minded that we close all options out because we just want to, save one little thing. You can't close all options. I believe we have to have everything open for every situation to try to be there. But I'm going to get off of that horse because we have a couple other questions that we need to jump into. On
Pastor Daryl, before you move on, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. I know that there are some confusion between the term parental notification and parental consent.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
did you want to?
Do you?
Yes,
do you
please
want to talk about
clarify.
the podcasts, or you want me to talk about
You can do traditional
Okay.
podcasts and I'll pass to you. Okay, but yes, parental notification is where a minor has to notify their legal guardian or parent that they're getting an abortion. Just notify. Parental
Mhm.
consent means that they need permission from their parent or guardian to get an abortion. Florida requires both. So I know Gabby wants to give a little bit more context. What happens if those two things can't happen?
Yeah,
Okay.
and this only happens usually in extreme cases. Minors obtain what's called a judicial bypass. And I personally think that it's awful that they even have to go this route in order to have an abortion if they don't have parental consent, if there is something that is going on in the home. They have most of the time they have an advocate. Since the abortion laws have changed, a lot of the advocacy groups here that would go with the minors to the courts to obtain that judicial bypass have closed. A lot of them were based out in Texas. We used to work with Jane's Due Process. They are unfortunately no longer because they were a Texas-based organization, and Texas has completely banned and has started to criminalize abortion out there. So for their own safety, they have closed down. So now we are asking minors who have no idea how to work the court system to go in, fill out paperwork, get a court date, hopefully within the 6-week time frame that they have, obtain this basically consent from a judge that the judge will determine if the minor is of sound mind to have their abortion. So that's where I kind of feel like it's really not fair, because if a minor is of sound mind to raise a child, then why are they not of sound mind to have an abortion? And I think that's a really important, question that we should ask. Should parents be notified if they have permission? Absolutely, but that's not always the case for everyone. And we do have to take, people coming from those situations into consideration, because my story is not their story. And my patients that I deal with are not the same patients that, Chriselle deals with. So I think that's something that we should be talking about, when it comes to, the minor consent laws to eradicate confusion.
Thank you for that clarification there. So Gabby, while we still have you talking, keep you here for a second. On May 1st, 2024, a near abortion ban went into effect here in Florida. How has it affected the way that you care for your patients, and what have some results been since the ban has been enacted?
So I know that we always, we're focusing on Florida, but I also want to take into account that, there are other states that are banned, and we are also seeing the fallout from those states having, that ban. And Florida was one of the last, I don't want to say safe haven, but we were one of the last safe havens in the Southeast next to North Carolina and Virginia for patients to have access to care. So that means from Texas all the way over here to Florida and all the way up to South Carolina, abortion is banned. And either have a total ban or a near total ban in that state. From Florida, the next state is North Carolina. North Carolina requires a 72-hour consent prior to patients being able to come in and access their abortion care. And again, Florida has that 6-week ban. So they're very limited. They have a very small window of what they are able to have access to that care. So people, including myself, are having to be more diligent. When I just actually had my second abortion earlier this year, right after the law had changed. And I knew it was coming, just like our patients knew it was coming. And I knew that I had to be more diligent with my own health. And patients we are seeing are actually, doing the same thing, which is great because they are able, to catch it a little bit earlier. But what I hate is that we cannot give them the gift of time that I had, like with my first abortion. This is a hard decision for people to make, and they should be able to have that time to really, think about if that's something that they want them to do. We hear the antis all the time, oh, people, they regret their abortion. I know I have never regretted any of my abortions. And, we want patients to make sure that they are making the absolute right decision for themselves. And with this 6-week ban, we have had to work harder. Our call center is, filled with so many, calls, and it's back to back every day. We went from, taking maybe 100 to 200 calls a day. Now we're taking up to 1,000, sometimes 2,000 calls a day. And I have 10 wonderful ladies on my staff, that are out here, taking these calls, trying to get patients in with our clinic or other clinics. The community has had to come together a lot more with this because, I know that we are full, and, when we're full, we refer patients out to other clinics, which is great because the community should be coming together. It shouldn't be, one of these, oh, I want all the patients here, or oh, I want all the patients there. That is not how this works. And, it has been a lot harder on the other side of things because not only are we seeing Florida patients, but we're seeing patients from other, states. The funding is not there anymore. So when I started with A Woman's Choice, I started as a patient navigator. I found funds for patients in order to have access to abortion care. So patients, who could not afford their procedure, or patients who could not afford to get to the clinic for their procedure, I found them a way to be able to, have funds for either or sometimes both, because people come from so many backgrounds. And, the funding, unfortunately, is not there anymore because people from everywhere are having to unfortunately travel, not just hundreds of miles, but thousands of miles to have access to care, which this is ridiculous. And some people are in life-threatening conditions, and, they can't even get care in their own state. I just spoke to a woman this week that was coming from Texas. She needed to have an ultrasound. The closest place that she could get an ultrasound was 2 hours away from her in Dallas. I mean, this is insane. This is just basic healthcare that we're asking, to have. And, it's really hard. And, going back to the funding, it's the money, unfortunately, is not there anymore. So now we are dealing with, patients that are already upset because we have to tell them, like, I'm sorry, you're too far. We can't see you at this clinic. Now you're going to have to travel. And a lot of our patients that we see are, people from the BIPOC community, people from the LGBT community. We see a lot of minors. We see a lot of people coming from very adverse situations, and they cannot afford to do that. We're seeing single moms. We're seeing people that are already parenting, and we're asking them to take, multiple days off of work to not only travel, but then to go in and speak to a doctor. So, they can make sure that, this is a decision that's best for them. And then we're going to tell them that they have to wait additional days just in case they change their mind on a decision that they've already made their mind up about. I mean, this is ridiculous, and it's hurtful. And again, back to the money thing. We have had to turn people away because we don't have the funds. And that is a very hard conversation to have to, a 12-year-old and her mom, and we're telling them, like, unfortunately, we can't see you. We don't have any funds. And, the mom's got 6 other kids that she has to take care of in the home. And we can't help them because we don't have the funding for it anymore, because everybody is having to come together as a community and pick up where, it is lacking. And it is very hard. And, I have been screamed at, I have been cussed out, and I hate it because I want to help these people that are trying to access this care. But I think my biggest takeaway from this is all this anger that everybody is feeling towards their legislator in their own states, not just Florida, take that anger and go to the polls. We hear you, we feel it. It hurts us, it hurts me. I hate having to turn patients away. I hate having to tell people that I can't help them because we don't have the capacity to do it. Our doctors are burnt out, our staff is burned out. I'm burnt out. My work days have gone from, 7, 8 hour work days to 13, 14 hour days. So now I'm working, in the trenches with this, and I'm missing out on time at home with my own child because I want to make sure that people have access to the care that they need and deserve in this world. And it's not just in Florida, it's all of these other states. And, I just want, everybody that is feeling some sort of, adversity towards this or whatever it may be, take those feelings with you to the polls. We can't do change by sitting behind a computer. We can't do change by just posting something on Facebook. Everybody is posting on Facebook. We need boots on the ground. We need people that are actually going to be out there, just like Rochelle is and just like everybody else is that's sitting on this panel and is actually making the hard, impactful changes and having those hard and conversations in the community, for us to actually have positive and impactful change everywhere.
Yeah. So I want to highlight something you said, three things that you said in 30 seconds or less. I want to highlight three things that you said that shows the interconnectivity of all of this. You mentioned that you have right now about 2,000 calls a day. You mentioned that there's a lack of funding. So 2,000 calls a day, a lack of funding, and then I want to show the interconnectivity. Can you mention again, because I don't know if everybody caught it, the total or near total ban of abortion? I believe you said from Texas all the way over to North Carolina, basically. Am I right on that?
Yeah, so North Carolina is the only place in the Southeast that has abortion care past 6 weeks. So I can name all the states. We have Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Am I missing any of them? I already said Tennessee.
South.
The whole South.
So,
Louisiana has a total ban.
so looking at the connectivity of all of that, that means that if somebody's in Florida, right, you have no care, no access to care, literally, whether you go east, west, or north for hundreds of miles, and then there's no funding. And I want to also go a little bit further talking about the funding. Also, a lot of these states that have abortion bans or near total abortion bans do not offer funding for taking care of the child post-birth. So we make you have the child and then still don't want to give you any funds to help with the medical expenses and to help with taking care of the child, things along those lines. And so I just want us to really, kind of think about that for a moment. We'll have a few more minutes, and so I do have two other questions that I have here that I want to ask. And this one is for anybody that wants to answer. In what ways can faith leaders and community leaders encourage dialogue on abortion that fosters compassion and understanding instead of division in their houses of worship, churches, and communities?
I'm gonna jump in on that a little bit because I'm working with pastors and pastors like yourself, pastors like Pastor Gundy, and I would tell pastors to start having listening sessions. Make your church a safe place. Make it a safe place where people can come and talk about their issues. People can come and share. Is that not what church is? Is that not what testimony service used to be? Like, make your church what it used to be and what it should be, which is a safe place for people to come and talk to you and not have to worry about looks and stares and judgment and condemnation. That is not what the church is. That is not what the church is. So I would implore faith leaders to not only make yourself make your space a safe place, but I would also encourage them, because the Bible tells us to go and seek out the oppressed and go alongside of them to fight for their liberation. That's what the church is supposed to do. Y'all don't get me excited now. Yes. So that is my 2 cents. I'm sorry.
And Santil, I would really like to hear from you, especially with the young adult. To me, right now, you represent that young adult population, right? That college age population. What ways do you think we, as faith leaders and community leaders, can encourage dialogue on abortion that fosters compassion and understanding instead of division and separation?
I definitely think that a safe space is imperative to have, a complicated conversation on abortion, this topic. I know that in school we usually don't discuss it. It is mentioned a lot, but it's not something that's debated because this is a very heated topic, and college students can get really riled up. As for, I can't really think of another answer besides creating a safe space. That was really great. That was perfect. I think making that safe space to where people can converse about it and not really worry about judgment. Creating that judgment-free zone is amazing. But as a student or a young adult, I really don't. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no. Like you said,
But
that safe
I
space.
agree.
Yeah, yeah. Safe. I
Yeah.
think safe space is very important. And again, having that safe space, part of that is having a listening ear, right? I think as faith leaders, especially faith leaders, I'm gonna speak on behalf of pastors, as faith leaders and community leaders, we cannot be so quick to want to talk. We have to listen and hear. That being said, I do want to make sure that we have time for some questions from anybody that may be watching. So I have one last question. What actions can students, faith leaders, community leaders, physicians, I mean everybody, what actions can we take to engage our communities in conversations about reproductive justice and to support Yes on 4 at the polls this November?
I can start this one off. I want to say the biggest action you can take is volunteering. I do a lot of volunteering outside of, my class schedule. There are Yes on 4 hubs where you can see, nearby, and no matter where you are, there should be, well, especially in the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, you should be able to see any sort of nearby volunteering opportunities. I can't send the link in the chat though, once I pull that up. But yeah, there are volunteering opportunities near you, where you can go door-to-door canvassing, you can go crowd canvassing, and you have other people with you who can train you if it's something that you've never done before. So it's pretty easy, pretty smooth. And the system that they use is pretty easygoing. So you're not talking to someone who's in total opposition. Most of the people that I talk to are in complete support of Yes on 4 and have already voted or made a plan to vote. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest action you can do as a student is volunteer, talk to your peers about it, and be that outlet, be an outreach to people. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and piggyback off of what Mishika said. Like, I think besides voting yes on 4 yourself, one of the biggest things you can do is click on that mobilize link and find some type of action to take part in. Because like I said, it's literally 10 days left until election day. And I'm so glad that Mishika brought up voting plans. And what a voting plan is making sure that you, one, know where to vote, and then also doing your research and then asking your friends to come with you to vote. So yeah, like I said, voting and volunteering are like the main things, and continuing these conversations as well, because the issue of abortion access does not go away after November 5th. And so having these destigmatizing
In the poetry community, I
conversations.
would say rewind.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, like I said, abortion doesn't go away after November 5th. Like we need to have these destigmatizing conversations, making sure that we are building our family units to have these conversations, our community spaces. So definitely still keeping an eye out for what you can do after November 5th for abortion.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will say, I saw this comment in the chat, and I just want to highlight it for a moment. Sarah said that one thing that she missed is youth night, hanging out, talking, and having fun. And she says that's when to have a conversation. And I'll say, just doing a shout out to my church and my social justice advocate coordinator who started a young adult services called Is It Bible Though, where we literally just have a roundtable discussion. Nothing is off limits. Talk about whatever you want to talk about, and we hear from them, right? And you just talk about whatever you want to talk about. And then at the end, we come and give, okay, well, let's give the biblical perspective. And it's not about you, it's truly a safe space, is really what it is, to have real meaningful conversations. The tagline at our church is where real life and faith intersects. And so I believe that we have to make sure that we have real life always on the forefront of our mind. Sarah, I saw someone else, Rebecca also said that from an interfaith perspective, it's important to remember that Jewish theology says that life begins at first breath, that abortion is the recommendation when the mother's life is in danger, but that life begins at first breath. And so I think we have to continue to remember these interfaith things. But like we said, there's so many different faiths, so many different beliefs, even to include non-belief. And what you believe, that's your personal belief. But I believe that we should stand together, vote yes on 4, and we need to put things back in the hands of our mothers, soon to be mothers, or not soon to be mothers. Put things back in the hands of our women, and remove decisions from being made from people that have no true vested interest in the personal life of the individual. But that being said, I believe at this time we have a question period. If anybody that's watching has any questions, Adwan, are we opening it up to them via where they can come on, or do they have to put their questions in the chat?
No, so Dan will, if they want to come off speaker, Dan can unmute them and then they can go. Or but if they want to put it in the chat, they can. And or if they have a comment, right? If they have something that they want to share.
So any questions, comments,
Also,
concerns, anything?
yeah, all of that. Please share. Please share whether it be a statement or your experience or whatever to help the conversation or to help people who are listening. Please, please do come off the mic or drop your questions or drop your
And
statement in the chat.
Dan just dropped one. This question is coming from Sarah Foster. It says that this discussion has made me curious how more faith leaders can show their congregations that they themselves can be confided in during challenging conversations like this. I never felt my pastor was that approachable. Ah, how can faith leaders show their congregations that they can be confided in? I think part of it, and I'm gonna just speak from a faith leader, and please anybody else jump in. I think from my vantage point, part of it is saying just that standing in the pulpit or in the house of worship or wherever it is that you teach from, preach from, or whatever, and making it plain that listen, you can come to me about anything after service, during service, whatever the case may be, that we are here to have real life discussions, that we have to be willing to be transparent, but not only transparent, I believe we have to be willing to be vulnerable. And I think as a pastor, one of the hardest things I found to be was to be vulnerable with my congregation, because oftentimes the congregation looks at you and they put you on the pedestal. And I let them know, hey, don't put me on this pedestal because I'm human just like you. I have issues just like you. I go through things just like you. And these are my beliefs. Here's what I think. And have dialogue and talk. Shawan says transparency during sermon and teaching moments. That's the answer that she gave. But anybody else would like to answer that?
Real quick, one little technical caveat. My technical team just told me that put your questions and answers inside the Q&A. Use the Q&A. We had to cut off the mute because our link got out there when our link kind of got out there. So we had to make sure that we had safety precautions. So if you do have those, you can continue to put in that, or you can go to that Q&A if you see that Q&A on your Zoom screen.
So Q&A or got you. Are there any other questions or anything? Or anybody else would like to answer that? How do you believe that faith leaders can show their congregations that they can be confided in and have challenging conversations like this?
For me, I think one way that faith leaders can do that is to initiate the conversations, right? And what I mean by that is I mean by if kind of like what was mentioned in the chat, like if faith leaders are talking about it, then their congregations will feel comfortable talking about it. If they're seeing their pastor, because pastors are trusted messengers, right? In our communities as well as our congregations, in their congregations. I believe that if if faith leaders take these issues head on and maybe not wait, because a lot of people are not going to come to faith leaders because just like what was put in the chat, like some people feel that their faith leaders are not approachable. Some people feel like faith leaders are too holy, right? Some people, I talked to this pastor one time, and we're talking about, yes on four and this and I was like, and he was just like, man, he was real like, either way, it don't matter to me, woman's choice or, it's whatever. And I was like, has nobody came and talked to you about this? No, nobody in my congregation. And I was like, I wonder why. Like, have you initiated, have you made it comfortable? Like you can get visitors into your house and you can make them feel welcome. You let them sit down and they feel like they can go in your refrigerator and all of that stuff. Like you got to make people feel comfortable to talk about. These are very difficult decisions, very difficult topics to talk about. And if we can't talk about these things at our church and with our faith leaders, if we can look to them to steer us to the word of God, but can't look to them to steer us through these life decisions, because life be lifing, y'all. I don't know if y'all know. My life be lifing 4 times. And I can only imagine what women go through who have to make these decisions. So it is very important for me that faith leaders, and that's really what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a coalition of faith leaders who makes their space comfortable for people to go and talk about very difficult situations.
Love the answer. Laura put in here, and it brings up an interesting thought in my head. She put in here, talking about the Jewish tradition, that if the mother's life is in jeopardy in the Jewish tradition, it is more than recommended, but it is required for an abortion. And she's with the National Council of Jewish Women. And it makes me think for a moment. So if there is a total ban or near total ban in the state, would this not conflict with their religious requirement, right? If it's not just recommended, but it's required that if a woman's life is in jeopardy, that this pregnancy is terminated. Well, what do they do if the law says that they cannot have it done? And now you're impeding upon somebody's religious rights. Just want us to kind of think this through, because it's not just a linear conversation. There's so many different facets to these conversations, and we have so many unintended consequences when we make laws. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? Yes, it becomes a violation of freedom of religion. Thank you. Thank you. I was just wondering. She said it becomes a violation of freedom of religion. Well, if there are no other questions, and you can let me know if there's any or if anybody's trying to come off mute, because I cannot see that portion on my screen, then I will say I'm going to turn this back over, close out our roundtable discussion and our question and answer period, and I'm going to turn this back over.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a question in the look at Dan's
Oh, Dan just said a comment from someone. It
mhm,
says, I had an abortion and felt the shame from making the decision. There were protesters out calling me a murderer. It
mm.
took my spiritual faith to heal from the choice. However, looking back, I made the best decision at the time. I'm still glad that I had the right to choose. Man, how powerful is that statement? And said that they had an abortion and they felt shame from making the decision. And listen to what it says here, that there were protesters on the outside calling them a murderer, causing them to feel even more shame and grief on the decision that they had to make. And it took their spiritual faith to heal them from the choice. And they said, but even though they felt the shame during that time, looking back on it, they still feel as though they made the best decision at that time in their life. And they're glad that they had the right to choose. And so this shows us that these are not easy choices. I know for some people, it may be an easy choice. Oop, I got pregnant. I didn't mean to, or something happened and I need to terminate this pregnancy. But there are other people that are really wrestling with this, right? And so there's not one shoe that fits all. And I think as faith leaders, we have to be very careful on how we address people and deal with people. It has to be from a place of compassion and understanding. And also, and I'm gonna just say this as a faith leader, lean in. It ain't nobody's business anyway. All right, so that's just it. It's nobody's business anyway. All right, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to also add to that. She said the protesters were Christians.
Yes.
And she used the hat. So protesters, Christians were making her feel shameful, and she had to use her spiritual guidance to overcome the shame that Christians put on her. I don't ever recall any scripture. I've never seen Jesus shame anybody he was trying to save.
Well, I'm gonna say this: the Bible does tell this story about this woman that was caught in the very act of adultery.
Preach it.
So she was caught in it. Now they brought the lady. I don't know why they didn't bring the man too, but they brought the lady in front of Jesus and they asked him. They said, "You know, Jesus, the law says that this woman should be put to death. What do you say?" I like Jesus because he was petty. He ignored them and started writing in the sand and just ignored them completely. And whatever he wrote in the sand, they looking and he just writing. And then he says this. He says, "You without sin cast the first stone." He didn't even tell them that they can't put her to death. He's like, "Yeah, y'all can do what you want to do. But I want the one of you that doesn't have any sin, you're the one that throw the first stone." Nobody could fit that requirement. The Bible says that they all begin to walk away until the woman was standing there by herself. And Jesus looks back up at her and he asks her a question. He says, "Ma'am, where did your accusers go?" And she said, "They've all left." He says, "Well, I don't condemn you either. You know, go and sin no more." And so I think you're right. The reality is that I think Christians sometimes, and I'm saying this as a Christian, we have things misguided. We think that our faith allows us the ability to tell anybody whatever we want to tell them and make them feel however we want them to feel, because we just think that we're right about everything. The reality is we should not force our religion on anybody. And the Christian walk, it's about love. When we get down to it, it's about love. It's about compassion. Even when there's correction involved, we're supposed to correct in love, speak truth in love. It's about love and compassion. And so I hate the fact that the Christian protesters, you know, made her feel shame and guilt and called her a murderer. But I'm glad that she was able to lean upon her faith to heal from the choice. And even though she had remorse, can still look back and say, but at the time, I made the best decision for me at that moment. Right. Dan, are there any other? I don't see anybody else populating in the chat with questions or comments.
Correct. We're coming.
Okay, we are clear. Thank you for that. Well, since we are clear, I'm going to move out of the way because I'm sure everybody is tired of hearing my voice. So I'm going to move out of the way and give it back over to you, Mr. Whitfield. Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this panel and to help moderate it. Thank you to all of our panelists. I appreciate all of your words of wisdom, guidance, compassion, and love. And remember, to everybody that's out there, vote yes on 4. That's what we stand for. We stand for yes on 4. So vote yes on 4. And let's take back the power and put it back into the hands where it should be. And with that, Ardawan.
Chriselle, go ahead and close us out. We're going to turn this over to Chriselle with our closing remarks and our call to action. Go ahead, Chriselle.
Well, everyone, first and foremost, thank y'all for sitting in with us and listening to different perspectives. But essentially, we're all saying the same thing. Abortion is healthcare. Floridians have the chance to fully participate in democracy and decide on an issue that is very, very important to many of us, not only important to our health, but in the grand scheme of healthcare. I also want to uplift the links that were shared in the chat. If you go up, there were several people who dropped the volunteer link for the Yes on 4 campaign. As Mishika said, we are always looking for people to door knock, to send text messages, and to go out into crowds and just let people know about Amendment 4, and making sure that they have a plan to go and vote. Also want to uplift the finding your early voting location. A lot of counties are starting to set up their early voting locations for people to go into. I think most counties end on November 3rd, which is a Sunday. Most polling places are open past 5 p.m. You just have to go ahead and look at your specific county's supervisor of elections website. So if you click that floridiansprotectingfreedom.com/vote, you will be able to find the resources that you need to place your vote and make sure that democracy is protected in Florida. And then I also want to lift up the UNF Generation Action link tree. There are plenty of resources for people who are looking for an abortion or any Plan B or any condoms or other information that a person might need. So yeah, those are some three great resources to make sure that we secure our future for healthcare. So again, like I said, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I really hope that you learned something and you are able to take it away with you to your community to make sure that we as Floridians are going in the right direction when it comes to making sure that abortion is accessible for people. So that's it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Go ahead, Pastor Ben.
Oh, no. I was just jumping right in, just saying thank you so much. Man, I'm done. It's on you for your final remarks and as we say in my faith tradition, final remarks and benediction.
You all be well. Are the attendees, are they logged off or they're still on?